can tell, he's a hard act to follow. But I came to Portland just 2 years ago. The first thing I did on my very first day to work, Mayor Sam Adams and I rode our bikes in from my house to the downtown, to the PSU campus, which is right downtown. And we did that both to symbolize our joint commitment to sustainability and our commitment to collaboration. And that collaboration has continued with great fervor and great enthusiasm. One of the first things, I think this may still have been during the interviewing process even, that the mayor told me is, I want you to buy as much land as you can, I want you to expand the campus as much as you can, I want you to build as much student housing as you can. Now, there are not a lot of cities where the mayor sets that as the message to its campus. And again, that was just emblematic of the kind of collaboration we have had. I'll return to that in a little bit. Maureen asked me in my remarks, well, in the end I will talk a little bit about the specifics of Portland State and what we do, but to also share some of my observations about sort of the civic and political culture of this area, since my eyes are still relatively fresh. I haven't totally drunk all the Kool-Aid yet, and perhaps have still a different perspective than people who've been here forever. And as you will find, it is a town that, to me, having lived in Boston, New York, 2 years in South Bend, so help us, Chicago, Baltimore, and now here, and of course after having grown up in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, where I spent the first quarter century of my life. Portland is more different, more unique, more distinct than any of those other places in its culture. Most remarkably, it's almost unfailingly polite. All you have to do is sort of walk up to the edge of the street and look as if you might think about perhaps crossing, and the cars on both sides will stop. And it will give you that time to cross it, and it shows up in a lot of other ways. In general, I've been told that as I sort of make my entry, to be sure to be polite before I'm honest. which is tough, because Dutch tend to be blunt. So I've had a hard time with that. And you will see the two web pieces that I put on your table. You will see some comments on that. Portland is known for emphasizing process, inclusion, and perhaps process at the expense of product. And I have seen that it sometimes just takes too darn long to get things going. Part of that politeness and process also is that you can speak to an audience and have people, say that's very interesting, it's very nice, but, sort of look like they think, you're right on, and then you find out later that they thought you were absolutely wrong. You were a total idiot, but they won't tell you that. That unless you get an absolute affirmative yes, thereafter may well mean not in my lifetime. So you have to kind of dig before you know what is really going on. Now in Chicago, now we've had a lot of stories lately about Mayor Daley, certainly along with these two gentlemen, one of the old-time great mayors of America. In Chicago, I felt, you could there are three groups, right? There are the political sector, the corporate business community, and then the community, which in the 50s and 60s, under the old Mayor Daley, was the unions, and then in the 80s and 90s, it became a much richer array of community organizations, civic groups, as well as unions that matter. And you can pretty easily identify the relevant power players in each of those three sectors, and it depended a little bit on the particular issue, who were the relevant power players. And anytime you got power players from 2 out of those 3 sectors to agree on something, you could get it done. Now sometimes it only took one power player. The example of Mayor Daley digging up the Meigs airfield runway is probably the most blatant example of that. But generally, if you've got 2 sectors agreeing, the thing got done. In my experience so far, in Oregon, it's not as simple, frankly. On the political side, and this is not a reflection on the mayor, but the mayor's office here is set up to be relatively a weak office. It's one of 5, the mayor is one of 5 city commissioners. The other commissioners all run also city departments, so they have a lot of power in their own right. The mayor is constrained in what he can do, certainly in a formal legal sense. The governor, of course, is totally at the mercy of the legislature, and Oregon has a terrible fiscal structure, which, while the mayor gets to, give give you freebies on the sales tax for it. It means we're only dependent on an income tax. And an income tax, of course, very subject to economic trouble. So right now, the state is in terrible fiscal shape. Very little chance of getting out of it very quickly. On the corporate side, while we have many wonderful companies, we only have 2 Fortune 500 companies, Nike and PCC Structurals. We have other large employers like Intel, which has about 15,000 employees here, but this is not their headquarters. In general, like many other mid-sized cities, we have lost a huge number of headquarters, a huge number of the few Fortune 500 companies we have. So we have what I would consider to be a fairly weak and fractured business community that is really not able to get that much done by itself. And then on the community side, we do have very strong labor unions. It's very much an old union town, a union state. A lot of community activity, lots of citizen participation. But that too, that's a fractious group. And within the state, we have an urban-rural divide. So certainly at the state level, it is not always easy to get the community piece together. Add to all this that we are an initiative and referendum state. So any revenue-related measure has to be approved by the majority of the voters. That in itself is a tough act, and even when it succeeds, as it did last January or February when we passed 2 pretty significant revenue measures, it left a legacy of really hostility, and a lot of business people are still very angry about those 2 revenue measures that got passed. So even, you know, regardless of who wins or who loses, it doesn't create a climate in which it's easy to get things done. So my experience, to some extent in Oregon, to get major things done, you got to not have just 2 out of 3, but sort of 3 out of 3 sectors, and that's a tough thing to do. Combined with that, as I said, it's very participatory, it's very egalitarian. I think I relate to that well, coming from Northwestern Europe, you know, it's partly a Scandinavian, Dutch heritage here. It's very egalitarian, which means that people do not necessarily welcome people who project themselves as a leader. People are very suspicious of people who put themselves up to be the leader. Well, at the same time, there is, I think, a great need for leadership. So, you know, these comments are probably a little more critical, you might say, than what perhaps you may hear from a lot of the other speakers. But, you know, I'm the academic, so I'm supposed to be, you know, always on the more critical side. I'm not paid to be the booster. I'm partly paid to always be the analyst. Now, clearly, nevertheless, we've got a lot of things done in this town. Certainly, for me, coming here, the way, you know, as I looked at it, and given the history of Portland State, I realized that one of my jobs was to very clearly project and position Portland State as a major anchor institution. Because indeed, if it is true, as it is, that the civic sector and the business sector, especially the business sector, has become weakened because of the changes. As you know, in most places, the manufacturing company is owned by some hedge fund. The newspaper, which used to be part of the original power structure, is owned by somebody in either LA or New York. The department store, which used to be here, is no longer here. The bank is no longer locally owned. So in many cities, universities and medical centers have become among the last men standing, the major anchor institutions. And we have not yet, as a group, stepped up to the civic responsibility that entails. So I've really been looking at how can we make Portland State not some kind of dominant player, but a very major partner in civic endeavors. And again, the welcoming attitude of the mayor and many other people has made that a lot easier. Let me just tell you a few things. As you can see, the first theme that I identified as one that was important was to provide civic leadership through partnerships, and I won't take you through all of these other aspects. That was reasonable for us to do because we are the largest university in Oregon and the only public university, generally public university, in the Portland metropolitan area. The Oregon Health Science University, where some of you will spend time, is certainly a very major player, but they're more focused on the medical side. And there we have a very strong and growing partnership with that institution. You'll probably hear about that tomorrow. We are also increasingly a research university, which of course is a very significant way to contribute to the economic well-being of the region. We were started after World War II to serve returning veterans and kept growing after that. This is a classic university picture, what we call the pretty girls studying under trees kind of picture, which every campus has. But indeed, even though we are located right in downtown, we do have a wonderful green campus, which are actually city blocks. These are the park blocks. They're actually city streets. We manage them for the city, but it serves as our campus green. We're located right now, let's see, we are, see here, you're here, right, Pioneer Square, right here. So we're 8 blocks south of here. It's a 50 square block area, about 50 buildings, has said about 30,000 students. Our total economic impact is about $1.2 billion. We employ about 3,600 people, which puts us in the top 10 of employers in the metropolitan area. We play all these roles that, similarly your universities in Denver play those, but it's by listing them and making people conscious of our impact, both as an employer, as a purchaser, as providing assistance and expertise, that really begins to make people see how important these institutions are. We do this in a variety of ways. For instance, we put out a document, and you have the summary of it at your seat, that focuses on how our activities match the economic development strategies that the mayor described. We work very closely with the Portland Development Commission, and we focus on sustainability and the clean energy. We have a partnership with Portland General Electric around electrical vehicles as well. We focus in our engineering school on advanced metals manufacturing, a key part of the advanced manufacturing that we have. We're collaborating with other institutions about the design industries. We work very closely with Intel on software and on the chip manufacturing and new technologies there. And we have focused very much on issues of public transportation, which is such a hallmark. Portland State is the location of the 4 busiest transit stations in the whole tri-metropolitan region. We have 4 of the busiest stations, and a full 65% of our students, faculty, and staff use something other than private automobile to get to campus. Only about 30–35% use private automobiles. Primarily, of course, they use public transportation, lots of biking as well, some walking. The slide that I showed you before that showed where the campus is the Cole University District, which is an urban renewal area. We're now working, again, closely with the city to refine and expand the boundaries of that to get us ready for our next stage of growth, because we expect to grow to at least 36,000 students in the next few years as the population keeps growing. Our collaboration with the region also is deep in the area of the education pipeline. Again, the mayor mentioned that. Really trying to be very systematic about how can we make sure that the whole continuum from preschool through graduate school works, and what are our metrics of success. It's an effort very similar to the talent dividend. It's a slightly different take on it, but we're also participating in the talent dividend. Our goal, in the end, is to be an active participant on the city's climate action plan by making sure that we do not contribute to CO2 emissions. Our own campus plan is a net zero plan, which is signed by many university presidents around the country. We're one of those. We're working on developing an eco-district, which will be highlighted by the Oregon Sustainability Center. You see a picture of it here. This sort of conceptual design is a joint effort between the city, the Oregon University system, and a coalition of about 40 not-for-profit, sustainability-oriented organizations. And this will be the largest living building in America, which means it will have net zero, recycle all of its own water and use that, generate all of its own power on site. It will be truly an experimental building. And increasingly, we will also begin to work with others structure of the state, because without changes in that, I think this public university will increasingly become a private university. And I have a great commitment to having it be a public university. Welcome everybody, and I hope that you will have time to walk a few blocks south and come visit our beautiful campus. Thank you.
That was terrific. Thank you both. I thought I'd start with a question for each of you, and then we have microphones if others have questions. And Mayor, I wanted to ask you, in a city that where the mayor is, what's interesting is similar to Denver and Denver and Portland are. Denver has, it's been a struggle, but one of the strongest mayor forms of government in the country in terms of the mayor. It takes 9 out of 13 city council votes to change one line item of what comes out of the mayor's office in terms of the budget. How's that feel? And so, but in contrast, Portland has one of the weaker forms of mayoral structure, and yet has a long history. Mayor Katz, when I was first thinking of running for mayor, I came out and visited a guy named Bud Clark, who was a tavern owner and ran successfully for mayor. And his example was he wanted to highlight the importance of culture to the city state. So there's a wonderful poster that if you go to one of the antique stores, where he would, there's a picture of him with his back to the camera and in front of a large statue, and he's holding open his trench coat. You can't really see the back of the trench coat, the title is Expose Yourself to Art. Anyway, I use that as an example that Portland has a long history of mayors having a significant impact. And I thought it would be interesting to hear the mayor's take on how, in a weak mayor system, how do you manage to get things done?
Well, I would say that the public, in the city of Portland, the public is incredibly engaged. We have some of the highest voter turnout. So we have automatic voter registration, motor voter registration, and then we have 80% plus turnout of registered voters in our elections, in many of our elections. So the voters are, the citizens of Portland, residents of Portland are incredibly involved. And that Portland process that Wim talked about is really real, and it is propelled by Portlanders themselves, that high expectation. So if you have an involved and interested and relatively highly educated group of residents, they respond really well to inspired ideas and innovations, but based on a firm foundation of research and facts. And I think that, that's definitely what I use as mayor. I was the chief of staff for Mayor Katz, as mentioned. That's sort of the approach that she used, that good policy makes for good politics, and a good 90+% of the time in Portland, I definitely say that's true. It is a meritocracy. There aren't ruling families here. There aren't sort of informal ruling cliques. Every issue, sort of the political landscape re-scrambles, and every issue you might be for or against a particular issue. And that's the way I like it. Having been in city government now for going on 2 decades in various positions, combined with the commission form of government that you described, it allows for innovation. The downside is you're always, and upside is you're always working to get stuff done, but being a citywide elected with executive, legislative, and judicial, quasi-judicial powers in one position, you're able to make incredible innovations. Our weakness is that you have 5 very powerful people, and they can, everyone, if it isn't working right, can certainly go in different directions. But streetcar, a lot of the innovations that you're going to see today, that came out of the fact that there was an elected individual who decided, I'm going to pursue this point of innovation, and then went out and did it. Still has to get votes on council, and still has to get public support.
And Wim, and I'm very sympathetic to people that are of Dutch extraction with difficult names. I wanted to ask 2 questions really. One was the this notion of having a mail-in ballot, which Oregon pioneered, and one of the arguments against it is that a lot of people that historically would not take the time to really learn about issues, but in the old days would not vote, would not go to trouble voting, are now voting, which puts a great deal of pressure, I think, on the institutions that try to communicate some of the substance around civic issues. And I think in most cities, institutions like your own do that. So, how do you address that relationship with voters around issues? And then the second is I just wanted to hear your sense of what was the greatest priority in terms of what Portland State is looking at in terms of what your contribution to the city can be.
Well, it's very interesting. One time I remember the superintendent of education, the mayor and I were sitting around and we're sort of talking about who really had the toughest job. And of course the mayor thought, well, you know, I got to do all these things and then I got to also get elected. And I said, well, yeah, but I got to deal with the faculty senate. And of course the superintendent has to do with parents who care deeply. So I don't think we quite agreed on who had the toughest job. But trying to get voters educated on the issues is indeed a very big thing. Our student body is just absolutely amazingly involved. It runs big registration campaigns every fall. And Portland State is the site of more debates and fora and discussion sessions on whatever the issues are that might come up in an election. So there's a lot of that education going on. On the whole, are voters more or less informed in the end by the time they cast a ballot? You get a lot of uninformed voters. I don't think I can give you a definitive answer to that. I know that just from my own experience, having lived in other places, having a mail-in ballot is just, in my view, an absolutely fantastic way of doing it because it forces you to sit down. There are voter information pamphlets that come with it. So you get a lot of information presented right there. You know, not everybody reads all of it. But, you know, I'm not convinced that in any other system, people necessarily are that much more informed. So I think it's really important. In terms of, yes, about the priorities for Portland State, our priority is to become a major urban research university. And we're well on our way. We increased our external research funding by 50% from $40 million to $60 million in just the last 2 years. As I said, we are going to grow from the current. Well, we grew in size by about 50% in the last 10 years, from 18,000 to 29,000. Our goal is to serve the Portland metropolitan area, and as long as that keeps growing, it means growing as an institution. So that's why we now have the physical plan in place to grow to 36,000 students. We very much look at collaboration with Oregon Health and Science University. And again, you have that at your Auraria campus too in Denver, the collaboration between the university and the health institutions, which of course is where so much of the innovation is coming from. There are so many opportunities here. And yes, one advantage, and I've really noticed that, again, in Chicago and Baltimore, there are so many institutions kind of competing for share of mind. It is, in a way, easier to create partnerships for whether it's the city, for major companies, to create partnership with Portland State because we are the only major public institution. They don't feel they have to kind of, you know, keep 6 different institutions happy. So I just love to come into the city. And I got to say that while I'm making sort of analytical comments, I hope they refer to see as critical comments, analytical comments, because I've been trying to understand, as I come into this place, how can I be effective and what areas can I be effective in? It is a place, as I said, unlike any other, and with the exception of my hometown of Amsterdam, better than any other.
Well, I'm going to guess that Wim has always loved each city he's been in. I'm just taking not to diminish the city of Portland. I spent a long night south of the woods myself. There's cold fitting it when I know. Have we got any questions? We've got 2 microphones here. John, there's a microphone right there. Or you can just shout it out and we'll repeat it.
This is 2 questions, but they're sort of combined. A, does Portland have a history of cable cars like San Francisco and some of the other cities? And related to that, light rail in Denver, I think, in the last 2 or 3 years has grown beyond our wildest expectations. But I think cable cars down some of our main inner city thoroughfares like Spear and Broadway and Colfax would make a huge difference. And how do we get that rolling in Denver? Because I think that would be the final piece of the puzzle for us here in Denver.
Well, it starts by buying some of our streetcars. Modern mayors, as this mayor knows, you no longer just sell your city, you have to sell products made in your city. You'll have an opportunity during the course of your time here, having looked at the excellent program put together, to learn the lessons learned from our efforts at Streetcar. And as an elected transportation commissioner, I will tell you, I have not found any other public transportation infrastructure investment, capital investment, that has as high a return on in the capital investment as Streetcar. And that's why we've gone with it here, because it works. And so you'll have an opportunity to answer your own question by the end of your time here.
What else? Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Kind of not riffing off that, but related to that, I had a question about the tax structure and the fact that you don't have sales tax. So I have both a theory and a question. One is that without the sales tax, you don't have the problem that we have, which is overbuilding of retail and different jurisdictions around Denver trying to, cannibalize retail sales. So I'm curious if you think that is the dynamic in Metro Portland, but also, how the hell do you do urban redevelopment? I mean, I don't know where you get how do you capture the revenue from, how do you capture the revenue that you use for public investments, and then how do you capture the return on investment if you don't have sales tax?
Great question, Councilor. The number one Costco, the chain, the number one Costco and their second store ever for decades, and is still in the top 10 in the world, is the Costco in Airport Way, just over the river from sales tax, Washington. So the benefit of not having a sales tax for the city of Portland is, I think, less, although we do get a lot of sales from Washington, less than, I think, the benefits if we had tax reform. And it's got to be tax reform. But this is one of those issues that has been voted down by the state 7 to 9 times, 10 times. Congressman Earl Blumenauer is here, who you're going to hear from in a minute. 10 times. And it remains very difficult to, I think it'll be in my lifetime very difficult to get a sales tax, either, sales tax reform. It's that, and every state, every city has their quirks when it comes to sort of, regardless of what sense it might or might not make, there's a public policy, you just can't go there. So no, Oregons do not like a sales tax. No, Oregonians do not want to pump their own gas. And yes, Oregonians were the first, and it had to be referred back and reaffirmed, doctor-assisted suicide. So those are the three. You can try to make sense and connect the dots as you wish.
For those of you who don't know, this is the one state in America where you can't just swipe your card and do your own gas. Someone else has to put your gas in your tank. One last question. I think we've got time.
Where does the money come from?
For the city. Property taxes. The city doesn't get significant income taxes. Corporate and individual income taxes go to the state. In the city of Portland, we have a tax on the net income of goods and services. The net income of goods and services within the city, but not traded sector sales. We have tax increment financing in terms of our economic development efforts, which is a real limitation. We do not invest enough in our economy, and we're working to change that. We also, we have a hotel-motel tax, thank you Sage and Walter, that also funds some of our operations, but it's mostly property taxes and business income taxes on net sales.
And just to add to that, the battle in the earlier this year, the referendum was our top personal income tax rate at that time was 9%. And the proposal was to raise it on incomes over a certain level to 11%. And that passed. And as you may imagine, a lot of people of wealth did not quite like that. And a lot of talk about those who create jobs choosing to move elsewhere. A lot of small business owners, a lot of people where they take a lot of their business income, as direct personal income. Capital gains fall under that. And so it's very expensive for people of wealth to be here. And so that was generally perceived and certainly presented as a major obstacle to future economic growth. So it's an example of, as we all know, every tax that you have has its own problems and issues. So the more you rely on one single source of tax, you magnify the problems that that particular tax has. And I think that's why it's one of those cases, so it's an example of what I was talking about, is that there is virtually universal agreement among analysts and leadership that the fiscal structure of the state does not work. And there's an absolute inability of that same leadership to get the population to agree to change it. And that's one of the challenges of the leadership.
Somehow sounds a little familiar. I've heard this. Governor Ritter or Snow, you're next up. Anyway, give these guys a great hand. Thank you very much.